stepping in
spectacular,
as well.
over the top. I mean, that was a full force shot to the temple. I mean, he's right now. So they wipe off his gloves, but you look at him like he's really feeling it right now. I mean, he probably has no idea where he is.
Time when I'm going to take your soul and you're either going to give up or you're going to get knocked out. And unless you have that instinct, you just will never be a good fighter.
It's likely that one big shot's going to land if the guy's not throwing other shots. So I thought with less artillery in the air, less bombs in the air, that the guy would have a chance to get to later rounds.
Okay, so picture this scene. Joe Rogan is hanging out with Anthony Joshua when Jake Paul gets absolutely flattened, and Rogan just starts cracking up. Can you blame the guy, though? Because if you're looking at this through Rogan's eyes, this whole thing was never even close to being competitive.
Well, realistically, it's one of the craziest propositions of all time. You take a guy who just had a boxing match that looks like a sparring match with a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, and then you're going to fight one of the absolute scariest knockout artists.
Rogan breaks it down in that signature way of his, getting straight to the point about how Jake Paul operates. The kid's got this whole system figured out, where he picks opponents who are either way over the hill or MMA guys who don't really box. That's been working for him, right? But now we're talking about something totally different. This isn't some retired fighter looking for a payday. We're dealing with Anthony Joshua here, an Olympic gold medalist who's been crushing people at the highest possible level. Rogan keeps hammering this point because it's everything. Joshua isn't just good, he's in a league that most fighters will never even see. And then there's the weight situation, which is honestly ridiculous when you think about it. Joshua's fighting way above where Jake naturally sits. Anyone who knows boxing basics could see exactly how this was going to end before they even touched gloves. The fight didn't prove anything new. It just confirmed what was obvious all along.
Fighting's not just physical, it's psychological. And when you understand the psychological warfare, I did say to you is that, Jake, what's going to happen? I'm going to see a time when I'm going to take your soul and you're either going to give up or you're going to get knocked out. And unless you have that instinct...
Now, here's what really gets people talking about the heavyweight scene after this beatdown happens. Anthony Joshua drops this statement afterwards that sounds almost friendly at first. But when you really think about what he's saying, it's pretty dark. He tells everyone that knocking Jake out cold actually did him a favor. Let that marinate for a minute. Joshua isn't just celebrating his win here, he's basically explaining that if that referee hadn't jumped in exactly when he did, if Jake had to keep taking punishment round after round, Joshua would have completely destroyed him. Not just physically either, mentally too. Complete breakdown on every level. What Joshua's suggesting is that getting knocked unconscious was actually the best case scenario for Jake compared to what would have happened if he had to survive more of that beating. That's some heavy stuff when you consider what kind of control Joshua felt he had in there.
The boxing industry, because straight after the fight, I heard the question being posed to Joshua, will he now fight Fury? And then my first thought was, after what I've seen, who cares? After that, who cares if Joshua fights Fury? I like Anthony Joshua immensely, Spencer. Any exchanges I've had with him, I think he comes across terrifically well. But I fail to see where it's taken us, where it's taken him, other than hugely increasing his bank balance. You know, I really fail to see what this has done.
Well, it's done nothing, but he was going to fight in November, like I said, and he's just gone in there against Jake Paul. What has it done for his legacy? Absolutely zero. But it was, you know, he's earned a lot of money doing that. And he's going to go again and he's going to fight possibly February, March. And then there's that Tyson Fury fight that's looming that could happen in September, whether Tyson Fury decides to come out of retirement or not come out of retirement. For Anthony Joshua, he's earned a hell of a lot of money. This is prize fighting, and that's what it's all about. And that's what he's done, and he's built a new audience.
So when Anthony Joshua gets matched up with Jake Paul in what everyone's calling a circus fight, the boxing community immediately splits right down the middle, and people are getting heated about it. You've got folks arguing from both directions and getting really passionate. A lot of serious observers look at this and see pure theater instead of actual sport. And honestly, the math backs them up. The size difference is crazy. The experience gap is like comparing a college player to a Hall of Famer. the pedigree, we might as well be talking about different planets here. Anthony Joshua has held multiple heavyweight titles. He's been champion twice, and he won Olympic gold before he even started getting paid to fight. Jake Paul? He's still figuring out the basics, while getting better for sure, but nowhere close to that championship tier. This whole thing feels designed to generate massive viewership and huge pay-per-view numbers, rather than being a legitimate sporting contest, where both guys actually have a shot at winning. That's exactly why critics immediately start calling it entertainment instead of real boxing that deserves respect. Simon Jordan, who never holds back his opinions, has a really strong reaction after Anthony Joshua breaks Jake Paul's jaw with that knockout. He says the whole event hurts boxing's reputation, and he's not being diplomatic about it.
Earning more than Joshua. That apart, Spencer, 6 rounds to get Paul out of there. Reputationally, how does it leave AJ?
Well, thankfully, it didn't go to points because I think that would have been a disaster for Anthony Joshua. I think that he needed to get the job done inside the distance, and he done it. Look, he could have done it at any given point. I think that he could have cut the ring off whenever he wanted to and got Jake Paul out of there. He took his time on that. He allowed Jake Paul to run around like a rabbit and throw the occasional shot from time to time. And I think he only landed one clean punch, didn't he, Anthony Joshua? And that was the one that broke his jaw in 2 places.
But, I mean, you said, did you not, to us in this very studio the other day, he's got to get him out of there in round 1.
I did.
Otherwise, what are we seeing?
Exactly that. And I think what we saw there was a little bit of entertainment. And that was pretty much it. But not entertainment that many people enjoyed, if I'm honest. I think that people wanted to see a demolition job. We didn't.
Simon Jordan takes his criticism way deeper, and his points actually make a lot of sense when you look at what's happening to boxing as a whole. He argues that fights like this make it impossible to tell the difference between real sport and manufactured entertainment, which is dangerous because once that distinction disappears, you can't get it back. These kinds of matchups steal attention, media coverage, and money away from legitimate competition between actual contenders who've put in the work to earn their spots. Jordan really drives home that Anthony Joshua has already made enough money for several lifetimes through his real boxing career. His legacy is set in stone. His place in boxing history is secure. So by Jordan's logic, Joshua absolutely doesn't need these novelty fights to boost his resume or his bank account. Here's something interesting Jordan mentions: even if that massive Tyson Fury fight that everyone wants never materializes for whatever reason, Joshua's financial situation is so locked up that retiring completely wouldn't shock anyone. The guy doesn't need to keep fighting, especially not in these kinds of setups. When Jordan discusses Jake Paul in this context, you can really hear how frustrated he is about boxing's direction.
Joshua and Jake Paul share the ring. Your takeaways from the 6 rounds that we saw, presuming you watched?
I was impressed with Jake Paul. I thought that, following on from what we're saying, right? A few years ago, he was on Disney as a kid, acting up, and has decided to become a professional fighter. That takes balls, but he's obviously striving to be as good as he can be. You can see that in the way that he moves, the way that he is developed in how he's punching and performing. But to make a 2-time world heavyweight champion that's still live, AJ's still got something about him, to make him miss in such an accomplished manner. All right, so at times he was jumping out and running around, but there were times when he was well in range and still making AJ unable to land a clean, solid shot. He deserves a lot of respect for that. And then the shot that actually finished the fight, that broke his jaw quite badly, didn't put him out. That shot's that shot he threw with serious intention has put a lot of professional heavyweights to sleep. He didn't go to sleep. He actually finished on his knees, didn't he? Laughing and spitting blood out of his mouth. So, like they say, it's a special type of crazy and a special type of brave to do it. But I actually, hats off to him, because he showed that he's developing some accomplished little skills in there to look after himself. The size difference is always going to fatigue him.
I know everyone will come with the idea that, AJ should just go in there 1 round and smash him to bits, and that should be it was a big ring, right? Perhaps he could have cut the ring off a bit better, but would I be right in saying that regardless of skill level, if you forget about that with the 2 for a second, if someone is on the back foot on their bike and doing what Jake was doing, it's difficult, no matter who you are, no matter the kind of separation in skill level.
It's a big ring, and you've either got to run at him and look like a novice yourself, or just take your...
Check this out, though. Joe Rogan switches things up to give Anthony Joshua these incredible compliments, and he really dives into what makes Joshua such a terrifying opponent from a technical perspective. Rogan starts with Joshua's speed, which is absolutely insane for someone carrying that much muscle. Then you've got the athleticism, which is off the charts for any heavyweight in history. And obviously you can't discuss Joshua without talking about that devastating knockout power that can shut your lights off instantly. Rogan explains how Joshua moves like he should weigh maybe 30 or 40 pounds less than he actually does. That combination of size, speed, and power is just unfair to everyone else. He carries this instant knockout ability that completely changes how fights develop, because opponents are constantly worried that one slip-up, one dropped hand, and they're waking up on the canvas. Rogan describes Joshua as a nightmare matchup for anyone, but especially for crossover fighters coming from other sports or entertainment backgrounds. He breaks down how Joshua can close the gap so fast that you barely have time to process what's happening, and once he gets within range, those exchanges can end with you unconscious. According to Rogan, these physical and technical advantages make it completely unrealistic for crossover fighters to compete with Joshua at any serious level. It's just not a fair competition from a pure ability standpoint. Rogan emphasizes that Joshua combines refined boxing technique with that Olympic gold medal pedigree. This is a massive, elite-level heavyweight champion we're talking about. What really sets Joshua apart, according to Rogan, is that combination of traits that rarely come together in one fighter. He's got that nuclear knockout power where one clean connection can end everything instantly. The scary part is he's fast enough to land that shot before you even realize it's coming. Adam Booth, who's a respected trainer and boxing analyst, gives this really honest breakdown after watching the fight, and he actually gives Jake Paul some credit, which surprised people. Booth points out that Jake Paul did manage to make Anthony Joshua miss some punches during certain moments of the fight, and Booth thinks this is genuinely meaningful from a technical perspective. He explains that Jake's movement and positioning showed legitimate improvement and discipline, actually forcing Joshua to adjust his timing instead of just landing freely whenever he wanted. While Booth makes it crystal clear that this doesn't mean Jake was winning or even competitive overall, he does recognize that creating any hesitation in an elite heavyweight like Joshua is legitimately impressive. It demonstrates progress in Jake's boxing development, even though the final outcome was never really in doubt. Building on his analysis, Adam Booth explains why those moments matter from a boxing education standpoint. He breaks down how making a fighter of Joshua's level miss punches doesn't happen by accident. It requires serious preparation, good timing, and real confidence to execute when there's a legitimate knockout artist trying to separate you from consciousness. Booth says Jake's footwork during those moments and his ability to stay calm when facing someone who can end the fight with one punch deserve genuine recognition. However, and this is crucial, Booth keeps stressing that these brief flashes of success don't change the overall reality of what happened in that ring. Joshua's class, his power, and his years of elite experience still completely controlled the fight once he found his rhythm and started connecting cleanly.
Paul would be more of a mismatch than Jake Paul. You know what I mean? Because at least Jake Paul has taken boxing or has trained with real boxing trainers and real boxes. Whereas Logan Paul, you know, he did that exhibition with Floyd, and Floyd's a little guy. Not saying a little guy can't thump, because Floyd really gave him some two pieces with no sides, right? But at the same time, you take his friend, Floyd's friend, Anthony Joshua, and get hit by him and see what happens. The same thing. Probably worse, because I think Logan, you know, he's a little taller than Jake. And because he's a little taller than Jake, he may think he's a little stronger than Jake. Which I don't know which one's true or not. I don't think it makes a difference. But because he may feel that way, he may want to go in there and try to bang it out with AJ. And if that happens, it's going to be a lot quicker. See, that 6 rounds it took AJ to finally catch Jake. It took that way because Jake was on that bicycle, moving, being elusive, trying to come in and then come out. He tried to do a very poor man's Alexander Usyk, right? And it didn't work for him. Logan ain't going to do that. Logan's going to come in throwing bunches and bunches like he did with Floyd, trying to get him in there and, you know, do all this stuff. And what's going to happen as soon as AJ lines him up, sets his punch, he's going to hit Jake, and he's going to break Jake down, and he may break his jaw.
After this knockout happens, the attention moves in a fascinating direction. And suddenly, we're hearing about Logan Paul apparently trying to intimidate Anthony Joshua while talking publicly about getting payback for his little brother. Logan reportedly shows serious interest in fighting Joshua himself, which immediately gets analysts discussing it. But here's the thing, they're not taking it seriously whatsoever. Actually, they're dismissing this idea even quicker than they dismissed the Jake fight. Analysts immediately explain that a Logan versus Joshua fight would be way more one-sided than what we just witnessed with Jake. Their reasoning makes complete sense when you examine it. They mention that Jake, whatever else you think about him, trains full-time with professional boxing coaches. He's committed to the sport, he's putting in serious hours, he's studying the craft. Logan, however, doesn't have that same level of dedication and skill development. He's dabbled in boxing, sure, but not with the same intensity or focus. A Logan versus Joshua fight would be even more lopsided, if that's even possible. The continued discussion around this potential matchup reinforces that Logan Paul's pursuit of Anthony Joshua would move from being simple spectacle into what analysts are describing as complete farce. That's harsh language. But they're choosing it intentionally. They argue that even Jake, despite getting beaten badly, demonstrated moments where he belonged in professional boxing at least on a basic level. You could see the training, the preparation, the grasp of fundamentals. Logan, in comparison, is viewed as much less refined and much less serious about boxing as an actual sport versus a money-making opportunity. The consensus among boxing experts is absolutely clear. Such a fight would provide zero competitive value, nothing that advances the sport or challenges either fighter meaningfully, and would only amplify the criticism that's already building about boxing's direction and where the sport is heading with these crossover celebrity matchups.
Got in the ring.
Jake was shooting double legs too.
Shooting double legs, nice
Duck
ones
unders.
with ankle picks, duck unders. But dude, God, people are, I see so much people talking shit on the fight, which, dude, what the fuck did they expect? Like, Jake was hyping himself up, saying he's gonna win. Dude, that's self-belief. He needed that to go in. He needed that to get himself into the ring. You know what I'm saying? He just needed that.
What do you think about the sticking that's hung out?
Dude, he's a showman. This is a fucking YouTuber that switched to pro boxing.
Yep.
And he's fighting Anthony fucking Joshua.
He's
He made
amateur.
$90 million. $7.5 million per minute. Nate Diaz says, that boy don't work hard enough. This girl in the UFC said, Jake Paul shot more double legs in boxing in a match than I did in my UFC career. Ryan Garcia said, he's a runner, he's a track star. Al Germain said, this is a clown show. Josh Hammond said, dude, it's like, what did they expect? They expect him to go in there and look like clean fucking Floyd versus Manny Pacquiao. Two of the, you know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck?
You see the aftermath, like his jaw and everything. Fuck.
Jake Paul's broken jaw. Jake has to get wired shut for 7 days or something like that.
Yeah, like
Tim
titanium
had to do
plates.
7 weeks.
Yeah, Tim says that's the worst thing he's ever gone through.
7 weeks. Tim broke his jaw in Montana. Tried to go to the hospital. Hospital said the surgeon's out of town. So now he has to. So he's fucking goes like a week without even getting surgery. At least Jake was able to probably get it like next day, that same day. But it's like all the people hating on Jake. It's crazy. Connor said Jake is stupid and will be altered permanently from this bout. I look at it. It's inspiring seeing what he does because I know how much like he's putting in work. He's doing legitimate fight camps.
Sean O'Malley, who comes from the MMA world and gets combat sports from a fighter's perspective, analyzes the fight aftermath by really examining Jake Paul's mentality and psychological preparation going into this bout. His perspective is actually pretty fascinating because it's more understanding than what most boxing analysts are offering. He explains that all the trash talk and public confidence that Jake displayed before the fight were completely misinterpreted by critics who just dismissed it as hype or delusion. According to O'Malley, Jake absolutely needed that self-talk, that swagger, that public display of belief to mentally prepare himself to actually enter a ring with someone who's not just talented, but a two-time Olympic champion operating at the absolute top of the sport. O'Malley draws from his own fighting background to explain that belief and positive mental preparation are absolutely critical when you're facing impossible odds, even if reality proves different and the outcome goes against you ultimately. It's about getting your mind to a place where you can actually perform, where you're not frozen by fear or the enormity of the challenge. O'Malley continues that without that mental preparation, without convincing yourself that you belong in there and have a legitimate chance, Jake wouldn't have been able to function at all under that kind of massive pressure. He thinks the criticism from people who've never competed at that level completely ignores how challenging it is to even share a ring with someone of Joshua's caliber. While the defeat was definitive and nobody can argue with the result, O'Malley believes that Jake's approach demonstrated respect for the challenge in his own way, and showcased the enormous psychological requirements of facing an elite heavyweight who can literally shut off your consciousness with a single punch.
I thought it was going to go rounds. I wasn't sure if there was going to be a silent agreement. I wasn't sure there was going to be a sparring match agreement that will spar for a while. I wasn't sure. I was honest about it. That's why I said it's going to go rounds. I wasn't sure if there was an understanding that, we'll play a little bit and then we'll get a little more and, whatever. So that was part of it. But there was real parts. Say, that's the fixed part. That's the WWE part. That's where the people, and I'm with you. I get it if you want to think that. Here's why I picked rounds, and this is what I think I saw, and I know that in my mind I saw, was the fact is that a lot of people didn't think about 15 months off. And there was going to be some rust. There was going to be some hesitation. There was going to be some time. He got knocked out by Dubois freaking 15 months ago. There were going to be ghosts in the attic. I don't care who you're fighting. You get in the ring again. It's going to take a minute to exercise those ghosts. The rust. You want to call it rust, whatever. It's going to take 5-6 rounds to get rid of the rust. But it's going to, the doubt, the self-doubt, the being in the ring for the first time with nothing in between after being knocked out. That was going to be a play. And then the size of the ring, 22 by 20. It's usually 20 to 20 is pretty usually around average. And it's 22 by 20. More room to elude, more room to move around, right? I thought maybe go in there with track shoes. He didn't go with track shoes.
During his preparation, Jake's doing everything. Sparring sessions, training rounds, eating right, handling all the promotion responsibilities. Teddy Atlas, who's one of boxing's most respected voices with decades of experience, clarifies that his prediction about the fight potentially lasting several rounds was based on genuine boxing considerants and legitimate factors, not conspiracy theories about the fight being scripted or predetermined. Atlas explains his reasoning thoroughly because he wants people to understand his thought process. He points to Anthony Joshua's extended break between fights, which is always a concern for any boxer regardless of skill level. Then there's the knockout defeat Joshua suffered in his last fight, and the mental uncertainty and doubt that naturally accompanies that kind of devastating loss. Atlas says those demons, those psychological wounds, take genuine time to heal from a fighter's psyche, especially for a fighter like Joshua, who typically isn't a fast starter in his fights. He usually studies opponents early. Atlas also considers the larger ring dimensions that were used for this fight, which provided Jake Paul much more space to move around and survive those opening rounds if he could maintain mobility. All of these elements were legitimate factors in Atlas's analysis, and he thinks Jake had a serious, carefully planned strategy that emphasized movement and conditioning. The plan was to make Joshua work, tire him out, but once the pressure mounted and Joshua started cutting off the ring effectively, things got difficult for Jake, as Atlas describes it. According to Atlas, Jake reached a level of intensity he had never faced before, both psychologically and physically. The combination of Joshua's constant pressure moving forward, Jake's muscular physique, which causes quicker fatigue because muscle needs more oxygen than other tissue, and the pure intensity of competing against elite opposition, all contributed to Jake struggling for air and fade. Atlas states emphatically, and he wants this to be perfectly clear, that the fight was 100% genuine, legitimate, and determined by actual boxing realities, not any kind of scripted outcome.
Yeah, an Ngannou type fight. Yeah, Ngannou, he's got balls. Ngannou's got balls, man. He went out there and he tried to fight, tried to win. Jake Paul didn't try to win at any point during the fight. He was just trying to survive. I think that's actually ultimately going to hurt him with boxing fans.
What do you think, Paulie? I mean, you talked about the in and out kind of style, kind of hits and runs, and you said that A, it runs out your legs. He was exhausted a couple rounds into the fight, and B, it only saved him for so long.
He doesn't have the boxing skills to box on the move anyway. Once I saw the big ring, I knew he was going to run for his life. When you're that much of a novice, which obviously it's not even an insult to him, it's just lack of experience, but when you're that much of a novice, you either know how to run for your life or fight all out. You don't have that in between yet. You haven't developed enough of that in between boxing acumen to really pull that off. And so what ends up happening? You're either going to fight your ass off and you'll last a minute. Chris, you're being generous. Round 2, he would have got knocked out in round 1 if he would have fought. But at least he would have fought. He would have got the respect of the people and more importantly, the boxing community instead of these clowns that follow him and are still defending him. Now what happens is you didn't get any respect as a fighter. You didn't get any respect as a fighter because you didn't try to fight at all. If he would have, I was watching that through 2-3 rounds. I'm thinking to myself, this guy would do this for 8 rounds if he can. If he can do this for 8 rounds, absolutely not fight at all, absolutely not engage a single time in 8 rounds, he will actually do this. And he'll do it shamelessly. And that's the problem. That's the problem. The shamelessness of his approach to the fight. You're going to be a fighter. Then don't make an ass out of the whole sport, out of the whole business, and out of yourself first and foremost. Because in the end, what happens? You got his jaw broke anyway. So what ends up happening? What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get hurt, you're going to get knocked out? You got hurt and you got knocked out anyway. But you just prolonged the inevitable, and you got no respect out of it now. Because nobody's respecting that kind of performance. Nobody's respecting a performance where you were totally content to steal money from everyone by running for your life for 8 rounds.
Chris Algieri and Paulie Malignaggi, both former world champions who understand boxing completely, provide this brutal but incredibly straightforward analysis of the fight that examines how badly things concluded for Jake Paul, beyond just losing itself. They mention that Jake sustained serious, legitimate injuries, in there including a jaw that got broken in multiple places and several teeth that were knocked out during the beating he absorbed. Yet despite enduring that level of physical punishment, Jake still couldn't earn respect from the hardcore boxing audience, which is probably what he wanted most of all. According to Chris, the fans weren't entertained or impressed, because from their viewpoint, Jake never really attempted to fight. He spent most of the bout retreating, circling, avoiding confrontation. Chris thinks, and he's pretty firm about this, that Jake would have been much better off attacking aggressively from the opening bell, genuinely trying to win, even if that meant getting knocked out sooner in the fight. At least then, he would have displayed heart and warrior spirit. Chris references the Francis Ngannou fight against Tyson Fury, explaining that fighters earn respect from boxing fans when they actually try to win, when they take chances and demonstrate courage. Paulie builds on this analysis by explaining from a technical perspective why Jake's hit-and-run approach was never going to work, even if he believed it was his best option. He explains that moving constantly around the ring exhausts your legs much quicker than people understand, and all it accomplishes is postponing the inevitable when you're facing someone with Joshua's power and ability, especially in a large ring where you have more ground to cover. That constant movement becomes draining. Paulie adds a critical point that Jake simply doesn't possess the boxing skills yet to move and fight effectively simultaneously. That's an advanced technique that requires years to master. As a novice, Paulie explains, a fighter can either choose to fight aggressively and hold their ground, or they can run and survive. But they cannot combine both approaches effectively because they lack the technical foundation yet. Jake chose survival and defensive movement, and both analysts completely agree that this decision ultimately damaged his reputation, with boxing fans much more than an early knockout would have. The failure to attempt winning is what destroyed his credibility. When you step back and examine this entire event from beginning to end, this one felt absolutely predictable, like watching something develop that you saw coming from way off. It was a mismatch on every measurable category, and it unfolded exactly the same way inside the ring when they actually competed. Anthony Joshua's enormous size advantage, his elite speed that shouldn't exist at heavyweight, and that frightening one-punch power all proved completely decisive, exactly as everyone predicted. At the same time, and this deserves recognition, Jake Paul demonstrated genuine moments of improvement in his boxing abilities, real courage and durability to even be in there absorbing those shots, and the type of defensive movement and ring intelligence that indicates he's actually studying the sport and taking it seriously, even though he's not yet ready to close the absolutely enormous gap to an elite, Olympic-caliber heavyweight. The reaction to this fight showcases two conflicting narratives that are essentially battling each other in boxing right now. You've got the critics who see these crossover fights as carnival-style entertainment that are genuinely hurting boxing's credibility and standing as a serious sport, transforming it into spectacle rather than competition. And then you've got supporters who credit Jake for the mental strength and bravery it requires to step up to a genuine challenge against someone who could legitimately hurt you. Whatever your personal opinion on which perspective is correct, The outcome reinforced the basic boxing reality that the experts and traditional analysts kept emphasizing repeated. Skill, experience, and power triumph. Those fundamentals haven't shifted, and they're not going to shift no matter how much money or marketing gets invested in these matchups. That wraps up today's breakdown. Thanks for sticking with me through this entire analysis. Keep watching, and I'll see you next time with more boxing content.